বলে বলে লিখব। Today I have already started the chapter forest. Today is a very important portion that have been remained in our chapter, that is the importance of forest. To some extent you all know what is the importances of forest, but still for the recapitulation I will tell again in a brief. Most importantly, forest's role as a system. In class 7, in this standard actually, you have to learn the importance of forest as a system also, and then some relatable topics with environmental science also, that is conservation of forest. So before conservation we also have to assess why should we conserve the forest. So that means what is the present scenario of the forest right now, we have to understand. Okay, so I am just jotting down the main points here. So forest, its importance, and next forest as system. Then and something related I already told, the disappearing of the forest, that means the deforestation. And finally, last but obviously not the least, that is the conservation. So I will come one by one according to the points. So first, if I tell you the importances of forest, then I can assess some points here regarding the importances of forest. Just like that, you see that forest is important first, that is as an habitat. So as habitat, you know that forest is a habitat of various kind of organisms, animals, birds, any kind of organism serves as an habitat. So not only habitat, if we relate the importance of forest with human civilization, because we are the human beings, so everything we try to assess from our point of view, then also the forest products. So if the second point, that is the forest products. Forest products like fruits, flowers, wood, and honey, etc. These are very important for our lifestyle. You know what are the importances as an edible product like fruits, as for various purpose in the flowers, as well as for making the furnitures. The wood are very important. Good quality of wood are very important. Collecting honey, is very important as far as the nutritional value, as for some ritualistic purposes also these are important. So forest products are very important to assess from the point of view of our aspect. Then importance is, if we turn our views back a little bit to our ecosystem or nature, then protection of the soil, soil protection. The trees have their roots, buttresses. They anchors the soil, so they actually prevents the topsoil to get flooded by the any kind of watershed, any kind of natural calamities like flood or etc. So they actually maintains the texture and the health of the soil. So in this way, the root buttresses of the trees, or trees means in a larger extent the forests obviously, so they maintains the soil and protects the soil. Another thing is that maintaining groundwater level. groundwater level. Forests are also helping in the maintain of the groundwater level. Another term is there, that is the recharging. Recharging, recharging of the groundwater, because the trees actually expels the excess water to the environment, as well as they by the process of transpiration. So they maintains the water cycle, as well as they recharge the groundwater level. So these are some importances of trees, as well as the assemblage of trees particular areas, they are the forest. Now we will move to the next point, which is obviously very important, that is forest as a system. What is the importance of forest as a system? So forest as a system. Forest means trees. Trees are what? They are the producer, or they are the autotrophs, or they produces the food. And you have also got some ideas in below classes, in class 6, etc., that in the food chapter, that there is a food chain is there. What is there? Food chain. What does it means? It is like that it starts from a producer of the green plants who produces their own food. So they are producer or autotrophs. Auto means self-regulating and troph means nutrition. I mean they are self-regulating their nutrition by the mode of making their food, which the photosynthesis. So every ecosystem starts from the producer, then producer have been consumed or taken as a food by the heterotrophs. Hetero means which organisms are depend on others for the food material. So they are heterotrophs. From the producer, there are, and they are also known as consumers because they consume the foods. Then they are primary consumer. Primary consumer have been consumed by the secondary. I will give the examples of each. Secondary consumers. Then it can be intake by tertiary. And tertiary consumer is also known as the apex level of consumer. Apex means at the top post. Producer means the green plants, obviously. The example of primary consumer, like who directly eats the grasses or green plants, like if I give example like rabbit, some moths are there, and they can be taken as a prey by the secondary consumer, and so they are primarily known as herbivores. Secondary consumers means who intakes the primary consumers. They are the secondary consumers. Commonly they are known as carnivores. Example of carnivores, like you can give example of frog here. You can give example of any carnivorous animals who prefers to eat fleshes. And then the tertiary or the apex level of consumer, who are known as the omnivores. Omni means all and vori means intaking of food. So omnivores, just like you can give example of human. So this is called an idea of a food chain, which is controlled by trees, and trees are makes the forest. So forest is serving as a reservoir or as a natural source of maintaining the food chain. Another terminology you will find in your books also, there is a food web. It is not very complex thing. Food web means it's much more practical, because when we are discussing suppose one particular food chain, then it is not possible that in a particular environment only one food chain is there, because there is the assemblage of organisms. So there can be more than one food chains have been interrelated to each other, they makes a food web. So food web is a larger concept, much more practical I told, because these are bound to happen, these are very much chances of occurring is much more higher. So food web is the mix of more than one food chain. So this is the role of forest on the ecosystems or ecological point of view. Next we can say that how the plants and animals are interrelated, correlated each other, interlinked or interdependent rather, we can say that the animals, some arboreal animals, some animals are depends on the plants, I already told. Now how plants are depend on the animals? The question can obviously arise. No, the pollination, you all know. Pollination means the transfer of pollen grains. And what is the ultimate motto of pollination? That is to generate their progeny, which is a form of sexual reproduction in case of plants. So plants are serving as a pollinators. Just like ant, if they are, then it is known as the myrmecophily. If any insects is there, entomophily. If there is other things are there, just like the snail is there, it is known as malacophily, etc. there. So animals are also serving, also helping in case of pollination to the plants to propagate their progeny. So they are, by this way they are interlinked with each other. Now comes to our third point of discussion. Just add some prefixes before forest and also some suffixes. Forestation and before that is DE. DE means deducing, deductive in nature. So when the forest has been deducted from the nature, this situation is known as deforestation. Deforestation we all see, mainly who are living in the urban areas or metropolis cities are there. Unsustainable cutting of trees are known as the deforestation. Now, what are the importances? Importances of deforestation means, the huge impact on the nature, soil erosion, dropping groundwater level, to some extent it will invite some unnecessary menaces like flood, drought, as well as the resources which we are actually very much dependent. In 21st century also we are very much dependent on the basics that we get from the plants, from the forest. We will devoid of the resources, devoid of the resources. So these are, I am talking about the consequences of deforestation. And finally, we cannot neglect the larger scenario obviously, that the global warming like scenario. Why global warming? Because plants, we know that intakes the carbon dioxide for making their foods, and they releases the oxygen. So if there is no plant, who will intake the carbon dioxide? And we know the carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas, making the above temperature level rise. So they will make the nature, they will raise the temperature of the global temperature. So that will consequence the global warming like scenarios. And also you will learn more deeply in higher classes, that is the plants serve as a natural kidney, or they also absorbs the harmful materials in our basically the industrial societies, etc. So, if there is no plants, then it will not occur. So, it will also cause a detrimental effect in our nature. So, that is due to some consequences of deforestation. Now, the last one of today's discussion, last concept you can say, that is, if the deforestation is unnecessary or it is very harmful, so we have to conserve the forest. So, what should be some possible preventive measures of deforestation or something deducing, something like deducing things? So, conservation. Remember, I am talking about only the forest conservation, not the conservation in general, which we will study in the conservation biology in higher classes. So, conservation of forest, first, the urge should be from our inner side. We should be aware that suppose there is no one, we are the only persons. Often we think ourselves as a boss, but we are not at all. We are very much dependent on the ecosystem. We are not apart from the ecosystem, we are very much integral part and a dependent part of the ecosystem. So, we have to be aware. So, public awareness is very much important. Then the rules from governmental bodies, sectors different by enacting laws, rules, regulations, etc. Nowadays, it is a ray of hope that many areas have been started some programs like afforestation or plantation of trees. Afforestation. So, afforestation বা sustainable implantation of the saplings, that is also important because saplings will ultimately grow to larger trees and they will serve the purpose. So, these things are very important from the conservation's point of view, and also there are some methods like already it have been started earlier in the post independent area, post independent time it has been in a higher, and then in the pre independent era also there was some law like Forest Act, Conservation Act, Groundwater Conservation Act, Air Act, etc. was there. So, not only the acts, it should be implanted in a proper way. And finally, we can conclude by saying that the public awareness is the internal urge of yourself, that is important. You can make campaign. If you start plantation the trees from your house from a very small level, then it can also arise the conscience of other pupils. So, it should start from that smaller goals and you should convert it into the bigger scenarios. That is it, what we can say. Just I am summing it up this chapter, and that is all for today.